Hello again. An interesting project. This is a Dunhill Canadian. The shape name or number is ES. From a prime period 1961. And Dunhill, none of the English makers produced all that many Canadians. The main reason is they're technically difficult for reasons we'll get into. And also the block of wood required was unusual in shape and quite large. And the briar cutters tended to make things more of they're cut the roots into cubes instead of long brick-like pieces. And when the long ones come out, it's more expensive. Dealing with them is a bit more of a hassle. So there aren't many in total numbers, which makes this kind of a project worthwhile. Normally, if a new pipe or an otherwise new pipe has a broken, you bite a chunk off the stem, you get a new stem, and that's the end of it. Or if the entire pipe is grungy, dirty, whatever, and you want to clean it up, that's something else. But it's not terribly common to see something that's a complete ground up, everything has to be dealt with situation, which this one does. So we're going to call it Back from the Brink. And number one, because each time one of these shows up, I'll try to make another video of it. So we'll do a quick cataloging of what I see, what's going on, and the approach we're going to take to resolve it. Now, first of all, some work has already been done on this, but it wasn't by me. The finish, of course, is normally a glossy black with some vague brownish or reddish undertones. This has been like scrubbed with a solvent of some kind, bleached the finish, and then the bowl was very badly caked, and I'll tell you why I'm certain of that in a minute, but has been reamed fairly well by somebody that used like sandpaper on a dowel, not a digger tool. Now there is a fissure in there that we'll deal with when I'll tell you about it when it's time. But at that point, the aspiring repair guy, I think, said, nope, I'm in over my head. And it was when they discovered they couldn't get the carbon out of the shank. And you're thinking, hold on, how's that a problem? Well, okay. Look carefully at the end of that in what appears to be a sleeve lining the airway, right? Well, it's not. That is actually carbon. The hole in the middle there is about 0.09, something like that. And normally it's about 125. This one looks like 122. Well, what we've got was one of these guys, I've seen them before, who would smoke their pipe and never, ever clean it. Meaning, as long as they could get a pipe cleaner down the length of it, it was good. No other worries existed. If they could get a hole, if you could see light between the end of the button and the chamber, keep on going. I once received an entire collection of pipes in that condition, and it's amazing that people do that, but occasionally they do. So what you see there is actually hardened carbon, like a sleeve, and it crawled all the way up the shank to the chamber, and that's when I think the guy decided his attempts to do a restoration were reached, a bridge too far, because they didn't have a way to get the shank cleaned out, which is a special tool. You can't find these at an ordinary hardware store. They're called aircraft bits. You can get them up to over a foot long, and that needed to be reamed out from stem to stern like so. And it was in fact in the process of doing that I decided to make a video. So that's already been done. It was ghastly when you'd put a light in down here and then look through the end, you could not see light to start with other than just a little sparkle. It was weird. And then I ran some cleaners through there to see what was going on, and it was a cavern that, you know, it was just like a coal mine. And finally decided that the only option, you could scrub that all day long with all the solvent in the world, and if it's the right kind of stuff, if it's hardened carbon and not just tar, it has to be mechanically removed. So here's the type of drill bit that, or the type of end that you want to put on something like this, and use that like a reaming tool until you get all the way through. So once that was done, no need to do the same on this component here, because we're going to build, or make rather, an entirely new stem out of this thing. So anyhow, there are inherent difficulties in making stems for something like this, and I'll quickly go through a few of them. One is they're extremely small. This is only about a little over 1¼ inches from button to the face here, and under 2 inches total length, including the tenon. So dealing with something that small is very fussy. It's not something I can do on the drill press with that tenon cutter, because this has the 45-degree angle here, and that requires cutting it on a lathe. So I won't be taking the camera and lights over to the lathe. There's not enough space to set all that up. I'll have to do that off camera, but I'll cut a new tenon. And a word about that for anybody who works on restemming pipes like Canadians or diamond or square shanks, where they get very thin in spots. First of all, the regular routine of make it slightly oversized and then kind of get a squeak fit and then sand it a little, and whatever you guys do, you can crack one of these faster than you know what happened if you attempt to do it that way. Be very careful when fitting these guys, because it has to be firm so that when you shape the stem, it has to be attached to the shank, and you don't want it spinning on you while you're trying to shape it, or you'll mess up the whole thing. And the other deal is a lot of guys are using glue-in tenons now, especially small diameter ones. Now this is only, it's under 1/4 inch. It's 2.34 inches, so it's a small one. And Delrin is slippery enough that if you use a glue-in tenon on something like this, be very careful, because you have to make a Delrin tenon slightly larger in diameter than if it's integral, made of rubber, because it's so slippery that it has to be gripped more firmly. It's not friction, it's actually kind of a squeeze operation. And getting a nice, what you think is a nice glide fit on Delrin, actually puts quite a lot of outward pressure on the shank and can crack it. So tread softly and understand what you're up against there, because there's no going back from a crack on something like this. You cannot do the embedded tube in the end of the so-called bandless repair. Can't be done on something that's this shape. And banding something like this is a wickedly difficult thing. You notice on none of these videos have I gone into banding. That's not an oversight, that's deliberate. It's it's very much a separate thing. And if you don't have considerable resources to invest in vast quantities of silver bands, which would cost several $1,000s, don't go there. Nickel is appallingly difficult to work with. Real silver is expensive, and there's a lot of tricks to it, and most of them can be solved with money. And I don't think that that's really appropriate for something like this, because you guys would just be frustrated by any attempts to get into banding or quality banding. It's to do it badly is easy, but to do it really well is ridiculously hard. So anyway, now repair banding we're talking, not making new pipes where you just incorporate it into the original design. That's not too difficult. So anyway, there we go. I have to make this tenon in this guy off camera, and I think that's all we'll talk about at the moment. Very much a nice piece, worth the effort. And when we're finished with it, it ought to look like it was just made. It shouldn't be detectable that there's been any repair work done to it or restoration done to it, which is always the object of collectible repair. You want it to be as invisible as you can make it. We'll retexture the rim and do some other stuff, but it ought to be fun. It's definitely challenging, and so we're going to call it Back from the Brink #1. And I will go off now, cut a new tenon. Back in a minute.